Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello, I'm Matthew Shipp, and welcome to Harvest to Pour. And today I want to talk about meetings, or rather how to structure specific kinds of meetings that are very important to any beverage industry, any company with a team of 5 or more, really. And the reason I want to talk about this is I was listening to another podcast, and I'm thinking anybody in the coffee world knows this podcast. It's called Keys to the Shop by Chris DeCiro. And this was episode 463, and he had a talk about meetings and which meetings he felt were kinds of meetings we felt were really important and why they were valuable, and some of the strategies conducting effective meetings with your cafe setting, focusing on improving communication, productivity, and team cohesion. Chris he emphasized his importance in structuring meetings that generally add to the value of both management and staff. Highlights and dislikes for meetings often stem from that lack of trust and perceived wastefulness. But he stresses the need for the meetings and results in actionable outcomes and follow-ups to foster trust and engagement. So he really goes into why these particular 3 types he talks about are super important for establishing trust, communication, and for a more effective workplace. Now, the one piece that I want to talk about of those 3 is I wanted to provide a little bit of ways to instill a blueprint into each one of those meetings, really the structure within the meeting. And I wanted to go into that and give you guys some ideas of okay, well, I have to have these meetings. How do I structure them? What are the best ways to get the most effectiveness out of my team with these meetings and do what Chris says they're supposed to do for your team? So he listed 3, and I'm going to talk about each one a little bit. First, he talked about the one-on-one meeting, which is great it should only be 20 minutes, maybe 15, and to focus on open dialogue rather than performance review. They're aimed at checking in with your staff members on a personal level and fostering a culture of care and attention. The other one is a standing meeting. It's kind of an informal check-in. Those can be really short or much as long as they need to be, but they're there to communicate alignment on tasks and expectations, and they can be really flexible. These ones don't have to be planned. They're when the need pops up. And the last one is kind of a monthly all hands-on meeting, and that's your typical 1-hour meeting. These are meetings that review the past month's happenings and address any kind of questions, challenges, and the aim is to provide a team-wide clarity and to celebrate achievements. So these 3 are the kind of the 3 pillars of meetings that any business, any team should look into having. And I'll go ahead and listen to that episode. It's really good on covering those benefits to your team and why. I want to dive into each individual meeting, talk a little bit more about how to maybe potentially structure those using some kind of neat techniques I've used in the past. So let's start with that one-on-one meeting. And the best way is, the biggest problem is when you step into it, you as the leader want to start just asking questions and pounding with questions and trying to pull more out of your staff. And the problem with that is they feel like they're under the gun, they're under the microscope, and they're going to pull back and give you a lot of general things. So one-on-one meetings get better with time, and they get better with time when the questions are somewhat predictable and you just let the staff person you're interviewing or talking to with the one-on-one talk, and you just listen, maybe even record it, and just start looking for the patterns that keep on coming up, and you'll get a way better understanding on an individual basis, on a personal level with your staff. One way to do that is, and some people in the other world, it's called rosebud thorns. So essentially, what worked, what's not working, and do you have any plans to do something with it? Or what's next? What are your plans next for anything that wasn't working? So simply ask them, hey, how are things going today? What's working so far this week? What's going really well? And just sit back and listen. And body language is also important. Nod, tilting your head, really letting them know that you're listening and be listening too, even if you are recording. Don't check out. So this is a very important piece. Then after they're kind of done with that, you just, okay, well, what are you struggling with right now? What's not working so well? Is there anything in here, or, you're personally or just something mechanically in the cafe that's not going so well? Let them talk again. They'll kind of cover those pieces. Again, couple nods, let them show you're listening and you care about what they're listening about, but don't really offer much advice right now. You're just trying to get how they're feeling, unless they directly ask you, like, well, what do you think? And then you can go into it, keep it minimal. Finally so what are your plans going forward with some of these challenges you gave me? And let them go in with what they plan on doing about it. And this is where they may either ask you or they may suggest something. And even if it's way off, hold back, let them talk it out, let them own it. If you just jump in and say, oh, well, we should do this, you're taking their agency away again. So really, a one-on-one meeting is you sitting back, recording, learning patterns over time. But if you keep asking those same 3 questions, they're going to know what to plan for, what to look for. And gradually those generalized, yeah, everything's all right kind of answers will change and get more open as they grow in trust with you. And as Chris also puts, is these one-on-one meetings have to be consistent. You can't stop doing them or you lose that trust again and you're starting all over. All right, let's move on to the standing meetings. Those are informal check-ins. These are the as-needed quick meetings. Now, this one I struggle with a little bit to kind of come up with a structure, because anything that's structured can sometimes derail your team a little bit when you're just doing hey, something's not working, let's group up together and talk it out. If it is something bigger, there's one technique I like to use, and this one you can modify. It's called a 1-2-4 all. It's from a discipline called liberating structures. But essentially, if you have at least 4 people in this standing meeting, you break them up into groups of 2, and 2 groups quickly talk about what the challenge is going on and possible solution. And the other 2 people talk about the same thing. And you only give them 1 minute to discuss the challenge. And then you have them switch partners and do the same thing, but somebody keep notes on what was said already, compare notes and add to that. And then have them switch again, talk for 2 minutes this time on solutions, and then switch and do it again. And then come together as a group and put forward the things that kind of bubbled up the most, the repeating ideas, ones that sound like the best solutions, and put those forward. What this does is it keeps a structured way from just having an open conversation of one person dominating and saying, oh, this is what we need to do. That includes you, owner. And you get to gather each other's ideas quickly. And this should be able to be done in 4 to 5 minutes. And you can come to identify the problem and come up with some general solutions pretty quick. I would only use this if you notice the conversation in these standing meetings are kind of going around in circles and nobody's getting anywhere. Then include that structure, that 1-2-4 all structure. And I'll include how to do this in the show notes. Now for the monthly all hands meeting. So originally Chris says this should only be about an hour. This is the only place where I differ. I think it needs to be at least an hour and a half, maybe even 2. And that is because you can cover a lot and get hung up on 1 or 2 things and never really get to what the real big problem is. And the way to do that is to slow the meeting down, break it up into sections, time sections, or little modules. Now that's going to take a little bit more time. That's why I'm saying add another half hour to another hour to it. But what you're going to be able to do is get at what the most important challenges are amongst all of them, and maybe even generate some basic solutions. You can go forward and test pieces of those solutions to see if you're in the right direction. At least you're walking out with an actionable. So how you go about doing that is I use a simple note and vote method, and where you just have everybody write out what they think some of the biggest challenges are they're having when this all hands together meeting comes in, and stick them up on a wall and put sticky notes, and then have everybody silently kind of vote on them. and the top ones will bubble to the top. Those will be your challenges you want to talk about first, because often those are the ones, if you can solve those, are going to solve a lot of the other ones that aren't as urgent. But you get them all there, you get them all visual, and everybody sees them. So one conversation doesn't dominate, and you realize that really wasn't the problem. And those are the challenges that you really want to address. What we'll do is it'll effectively isolate that challenge, and you'll be able to start kind of crafting solutions using the same thing. Use your team. Now they know what the challenges are. They have different experiences. Ask them to come up with 1 or 2 ideal solutions, and do this in a small window. So you have 3 minutes, 5 minutes, probably more like 3. Come up with some solutions, write them down on a sticky, write them down on a notepad, then share them where everybody can see them. And that is ideal. You want everybody to see them because you want everybody's mind to have access to this, because you can only hold 2, 3 to 7 things or so in your head at any one given time. And a lot of the middle of a meeting gets lost without being able to access the information. And then you can go ahead and say, okay, well, we want to work on these top 2 solutions for these 2 challenges. And when you do that, don't just say, here, manager, go ahead and work on this with your team. Step out of the meeting saying, here, manager, I want you to work on 3 of these aspects within this challenge. Maybe it might be creating a list of things, or it might be just doing a little bit of a customer testing and just and occasionally asking a customer about a challenge you're having. Let me change that. I don't have an example here. That's why I'm struggling. But have a way to test an aspect, small aspects of that solution together, and then come back in about 2 weeks and have the manager talk about what their team worked on these aspects. And then they can start asking, then you can kind of go back to sort of like that one-to-one structure. What worked about this solution? What didn't work? And what would be next steps to make this better? And what you're doing is you're finding out the necessary pieces to the solution to move forward with, and the parts that really weren't part of the solution, you just thought they were. That's a way to make a very effective. It's not as efficient as a 1-hour meeting, but it's a much more effective all hands on deck meeting, because now you've given people ownership of the solution. They've come up with it, and now they are working on trying to solve it based on more of a collective ideal. So those are some ways to structure. If you want to know more about those, especially the all hands on meeting, I am happy to talk to anybody about that and give you a nice blueprint on how to get started with that and how to facilitate it. So I'm happy to work with that. My contact information is always in the show notes, and you can feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to talk to you about my methods for those 2-hour all hands on meetings that are extremely effective on getting to the problem and getting the solution quickly. All right. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, reach out and let me know if you tried any of these and how they might work and how they worked for you. And again, I just want to encourage you, on top of this podcast episode, go ahead to listen to Chris DeFiero's Keys to the Shop, episode 463, to kind of get the highlight of why these meetings are so important for your team. All right. This is Matthew Shipp from Harvest to Pour. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.